HOA Karen tried to break my ranch gate rules. What happened next will shock you. You won't believe what I saw that morning. There she was, Karen, the HOA president, driving through my ranch gate like it was her personal highway. I'd had enough, but little did I know. I was about to trap her in a way she'd never see coming. But here's the twist. She didn't just break the rules. She played right into my hands. What happened next? Trust me. You won't believe it until you see it. Hey everyone, welcome back to HOA Secrets Uncovered, the channel where we dig into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes shocking stories that unfold behind those perfect suburban lawns and rigid HOA rules. I'm Mark, and today's story is one you don't want to miss. I live in a quiet neighborhood, a place where everyone follows the rules, or at least pretends to. But today, things took a wild turn. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and let me take you through this unforgettable tale. Now let's dive into it. It was one of those mornings when everything felt peaceful, the kind of morning you could only dream about in a busy, chaotic life. I was sitting on my porch, coffee in hand, the sun just starting to rise over the horizon, casting long shadows over the freshly cut grass. Everything seemed perfect. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet, and I had no idea what was about to happen. I lived in a neighborhood where rules were everything. The HOA had a say in just about everything: how tall the grass could be, the color of the fences, even the height of the mailbox. They had their eyes on everything, and everyone. It was like living under a microscope, but I wasn't one to follow every single rule without question. I had my own little corner of the world, my ranch gate. A gate I took pride in, a boundary that I never allowed anyone to cross without my permission. It wasn't much, but it meant something to me. It was my space, my little slice of freedom in a world full of rules. As I sat there, staring out at my gate, I heard the sound of an engine. I looked up. There she was, Karen, the HOA president, the one who seemed to think she had a say in everything. I'd seen her countless times before, but today, something felt different. Today she wasn't just driving down the street, she was heading straight for my gate. I watched her car approach. My stomach twisted a little. Was she really going to do this? She slowed down, almost like she was going to stop. But then, without warning, she drove right through my ranch gate. I couldn't believe it. The gate was there for a reason. It wasn't just for decoration. But Karen didn't seem to care about that. She drove through, like it was no big deal. She didn't even stop to check if she'd broken any rules. I stood up from my porch, my heart racing. What was she thinking? What gave her the right to just ignore my boundary like that? I grabbed my phone, but as I looked at the screen, I realized something. This wasn't just an act of carelessness. No, this was something else. This was a power move. I knew exactly who she was. The HOA president, the one who thought she could control everything, the one who couldn't resist pushing boundaries. But today, she'd pushed the wrong one. I couldn't let this go. This wasn't just about a gate. It was about respect, about the fact that she thought she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Not this time. I thought about confronting her right then and there, but I had a better idea. A much better idea. I walked back inside my house, my mind racing. I had to come up with a plan, something that would make her understand that there were consequences to her actions. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up for what was right. I began pacing back and forth, thinking about how I could make her regret driving through my gate. I wasn't going to get angry. I wasn't going to shout at her. I was going to do something even better. I'd make her play by my rules. I spent the next few hours working out the details. I knew I had to be careful. One wrong move, and it could all backfire. But I wasn't worried. I'd been planning this for a while, and I knew exactly what to do. By the time the sun started to set, I had a plan in motion. I would wait for her to try again. And when she did, I would be ready. I sat back in my chair, sipping my coffee once again, my mind running over the details of my plan. It felt good to finally have control. The tables were about to turn, and Karen wouldn't even see it coming. The next day came, and everything felt normal. I went about my morning routine, making sure everything was in order. I knew Karen would show up again. She always did. But this time, she wasn't just going to drive through my gate and get away with it. I stood by the window, watching for her. The minutes seemed to drag on. But then, finally, there she was. She was coming down the street again. I couldn't help but smile to myself. She had no idea what was about to happen. As she got closer to my gate, I saw her slow down. She wasn't going to stop this time. She was going to drive right through again. But she didn't know I had set the trap. Right when she was about to pass through, I flipped the switch. And that's when everything changed. The gate, which she thought was just a simple boundary, suddenly came to life. I'd installed a small mechanism that would trigger a loud sound the moment anyone drove through, like a massive horn blaring at full volume. It wasn't a noise that could be ignored. It would draw attention, and it would make her realize that breaking the rules had consequences. The moment Karen's car passed through, the horn went off. It echoed down the street, loud enough for everyone in the neighborhood to hear. She slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. I could see her face through the window, eyes wide, mouth open. She hadn't expected that. I didn't immediately rush outside to confront her. No, I wanted her to feel the weight of the moment when she realized she'd crossed a line. And now, the world was watching. But I still had one more thing to do before I stepped outside. One more move to make. And that's when I asked myself, what would Karen do next? Would she admit defeat? Or would she double down and try to fight back? I had no idea, but I couldn't wait to find out. The horn blared, and the entire neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath. Karen's car had come to an abrupt stop, and she sat there for a second, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. I stood there, watching from my porch, knowing exactly how she was feeling. She had just broken the one rule that no one dared to break in this neighborhood, the ranch gate rule. Her face turned red, and I could see her muttering something to herself. She wasn't just angry. She was embarrassed. The sound of the horn had drawn the attention of a few neighbors, and I could hear the murmurs from down the street. But Karen? She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to being the one in the hot seat. And that's when I knew this was only the beginning. I waited. The seconds dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I wanted to step outside, to confront her right then and there, but I held back. No, I needed to enjoy this moment. The tables had turned. The power had shifted. Finally, Karen put the car in reverse and backed up. But instead of coming toward the gate to apologize or do the right thing, she sped off, her tires screeching against the pavement. She was furious, and I knew exactly what she was thinking. She was plotting her next move, but I wasn't worried. She didn't know what was coming. The next day, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was from the HOA, of course. I could already feel the tension in the air as I opened it. I was expecting a fine, maybe a warning, but what I got was something even more ridiculous. The letter was a demand to pay a fine for endangering the integrity of the community by activating an unauthorized sound alarm. The HOA was actually accusing me of breaking one of their absurd little rules, the very rule they had failed to enforce on Karen. I couldn't help but laugh. They had the audacity to punish me, to try and make me the villain when it was Karen who had broken the rules in the first place. But they didn't care about the truth. They just wanted to punish whoever they could, and right now I was in their crosshairs. But they had no idea what they had just started. I didn't respond immediately. I sat on it for a few hours, letting the anger simmer. They wanted a fight? Well, they had one now. I wasn't going to back down, but I had to play it smart. I wasn't going to let my emotions drive my decisions. No, I was going to make sure I hit them where it hurt. I gathered my papers, my documents, everything. Every rule the HOA had ever imposed, every letter they'd sent. Me over the years, every single thing that had ever irritated me about them, I pulled it all out. I wasn't just going to fight this fine, I was going to make them regret even trying to mess with me. I could hear Karen's voice in my head. You'll never win. The HOA always gets its way. Oh, Karen, you have no idea how wrong you are. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. They'd scheduled it for the following week. I knew the place would be full of angry neighbors, and Karen would be sitting right there at the head of the table, acting like she owned the whole block. But this time, I was going to turn the tables. I wasn't going to just sit there and take their nonsense. I was going to make them listen. The day of the meeting, I walked in with my stack of papers, every fine, every rule violation, every little thing I could use against the HOA. I was ready. And as I walked in, I saw Karen at the front talking to the other board members, that smug little smile on her face. She thought she had this all figured out. She thought she could run the show. I walked right past her, sitting in the back of the room. I didn't want to draw attention just yet. I wanted to observe, to see how they ran things. The meeting started, and the usual complaints began rolling in. Lawn violations, mailbox heights, complaints about how the neighborhood was looking too disorganized. It was the same old routine. And then they got to me. "Mr. Your name," the chairperson said, calling me up. "We've received several complaints about an incident involving your ranch gate. We'd like to address it now." Karen's eyes narrowed as I walked to the front, and I could feel the tension rise. This was it. This was where I would make my move. "I'm here because I received a letter from the HOA demanding a fine for activating the alarm," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'd like to know, why are we discussing my gate when Karen here—" I motioned toward her. "Was the one who broke the rule first?" The room went silent. The board members shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. But Karen? She looked like she was ready to explode. She was furious. But she wasn't going to back down. She stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "Mr. Your name," Karen started, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're accusing me of breaking the rules? You've got some nerve. You activated an alarm on your own property. And now you're trying to make me look like the bad guy?" I smiled. "I'm not making you look like anything. You did that yourself when you drove through my gate without permission. You see, Karen, you think the rules don't apply to you. But they do." I could see Karen's face redden. She looked like she was about to shout, but I held up my hand to stop her. "You've been running the HOA with your rules and fines for years," I said. "But now it's time for you to learn a lesson. The rules apply to everyone, not just the people you want to punish." The room was still silent, and I could feel the eyes of the neighbors on us. I had their attention now. The board members exchanged nervous glances, clearly unsure of what to do next. And then Karen made her move. She started to speak again, her voice shaky but filled with anger. "You think you can just come in here and accuse me of things, huh? You think you can make a mockery of the HOA? But before she could finish, I interrupted. "Actually, Karen, it's not me who's making a mockery of anything. It's you, by thinking you can break the rules and get away with it." The room was silent again, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I knew I had just and did the perfect shot, but I wasn't done yet. I still had one final move to make. The silence in the room was deafening. You could almost hear the thoughts of the neighbors, all of them watching with bated breath. There I was, standing in front of Karen and the rest of the HOA board, completely calm, but every word I said hitting harder than the last. I could see Karen trying to keep her composure, her face flushed with anger, her hands trembling slightly at her sides, but I wasn't done yet. Far from it. "You really think you can just walk in here and make all these accusations, huh?" Karen spat out, her voice shaking but still full of that same arrogant tone she always had. I could feel the room shift, the power dynamic changing before my very eyes. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the entire neighborhood watching this unfold, seeing how the queen bee of the HOA was getting knocked down a peg. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone who had ever been bullied by Karen and the HOA. I took a deep breath and stood my ground, looking Karen dead in the eye. "What I think, Karen, is that the rules were meant to be followed, by everyone." I emphasized the last word, and she flinched. Her eyes narrowed as she tried to gather herself, but I could see the cracks starting to show. Karen wasn't used to being called out like this. She was the one who usually held the power. She was the one who made people bend to her will, and here I was, not just questioning her authority, but challenging it in front of everyone. She knew this wasn't going to be easy for her. "You think you can just go around setting traps and making a spectacle of things?" she sneered. But her voice wasn't as confident now. There was something almost desperate in her tone. I smiled. "Just a little. It wasn't a trap, Karen. It was a lesson." Her face contorted with fury. She was about to explode, I could tell. But I wasn't worried. I had come prepared. The power had shifted. And now it was my turn to make the next move. The board members looked awkwardly between the two of us. They clearly didn't know how to handle the situation. They had expected me to back down, to apologize for whatever it was I had supposedly done wrong. But instead, I was standing there, with evidence, with facts, and I was demanding justice. I didn't let up. "Karen, you've been running this HOA like a dictatorship for years. You think you can make everyone follow your rules while you get to break them when it suits you? Well, not anymore." At this point, Karen was practically seething. She clenched her fists and took a step toward me, but I held my ground. I wasn't scared of her. Not anymore. "You think you can just waltz in here and take over? You think this is some kind of joke?" she hissed. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "It's not a joke, Karen. The joke is on you, because I'm about to change the game." I turned to the rest of the board, who were still silent, waiting for someone to make a decision. "You know, Karen doesn't care about the rules. She's been doing this for years, making all of us follow her ridiculous rules while she gets to do whatever she wants. But this time, I'm going to make sure she answers for it." The room was still. No one spoke. No one dared to. "Mr. Your name. Are you accusing Ms. Karen of violating HOA rules?" the chairperson finally asked, his voice a little shaky. He had been watching the whole thing, but now he was trying to regain control. I nodded, my voice calm but firm. "Yes, I am, and I have the proof." I pulled out the letter from the HOA, the one that had fined me for the ale arm, and I placed it on the table in front of them. This fine, for breaking a rule I never even knew existed. And yet, when Karen breaks a rule, nothing happens. I could see Karen's face go pale, her composure cracking just a little more. She started to say something, but I cut her off. "You see," I continued, "what the HOA doesn't realize is that I'm not going to just sit back and take this anymore. I've been pushed around long enough. But now Now it's my turn to push back. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. I knew she was furious, but she was losing control. The power had shifted, and she wasn't used to being on the defensive. It was almost satisfying to watch her squirm. The neighbors were whispering now, some of them exchanging knowing glances. This wasn't just about me and Karen anymore. This was about everyone who had been pushed around by the HOA's rules, everyone who had been fined or threatened for the smallest infractions. This was about standing up for what was right. Karen was practically shaking with rage, but she still didn't back down. She glared at me and then at the rest of the board. "This is absurd," she snapped. "I'm the HOA president, and you're all just going to let him accuse me of this? Of course he's going to try to make a scene. He's just trying to get attention." I almost laughed. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about attention. This was about accountability. Something Karen had never had to face before. I turned to the board again. "You all have a choice. You can either keep letting her run this place like her own personal kingdom, or you can start doing what's right. I don't care if I'm the only one standing up to her, but if I have to fight this battle alone, I will." The room was silent. Karen opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, the chairperson raised his hand, signaling for silence. "We'll take this into consideration," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "We'll look into the allegations and get back to you." I nodded, turning to walk back to my seat. I had said everything I needed to say. I had made my move. Now, I just had to wait. As I sat down, I could feel the weight of the moment. I had just stood up to Karen in front of the entire HOA board, and there was no going back now. The board would have to make a decision. But what would they do? Would they finally see Karen for what she truly was? Or would they continue to let her control everything? The days following the HOA meeting felt like the calm before a storm. I could sense it, the anticipation hanging in the air. Karen wasn't the type to just back off quietly, and while I knew the board had to deliberate, I could tell they weren't going to make this easy for me. I wasn't naive enough to believe they'd just side with me out of the goodness of their hearts. No, I had shaken up their world, and they weren't going to forget that any time soon. I spent the next few days walking around the neighborhood, trying to keep my mind off what had happened. But wherever I went, I could feel the eyes of my neighbors on me. Some of them gave me knowing looks, others just seemed to avoid me entirely. The HOA had its claws in everyone, and standing up to it had consequences, but I didn't care. I had already made my choice. I wasn't going to be intimidated anymore. It was the third day after the meeting when the next piece of the puzzle fell into place. I was sitting in my living room, sipping on a cold drink, when I heard a knock at the door. I stood up, confused. It wasn't the usual time for any visitors. I opened the door, and there, standing on my porch, was a letter. No one was there to hand it to me, just the letter, with my name written on the envelope. I picked it up and examined it. The handwriting was neat, almost too perfect. I opened it and read the contents. "Mr. Your name. We are writing to inform you that the HOA board has reviewed your case in light of recent events. After much deliberation, we regret to inform you that we will be issuing a fine for activating the alarm on your property without prior approval. Furthermore, it has come to our attention that certain activities on your property may be in violation of additional community rules. Please be advised that further violations may result in additional fines or legal action. Sincerely, the HOA Board." I stared at the letter, my grip tightening around the paper. I couldn't believe it. They were trying to punish me for following the rules, while Karen got off scot-free after blatantly breaking them. This wasn't just a fine anymore. This was a declaration of war. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I didn't act right away. No, I needed to think. I knew Karen was behind this. She wasn't going to just sit quietly and let this go. But I had to be careful. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. I had already learned that lesson the hard way. I folded the letter carefully and set it down on the table. I had to come up with a plan, and I had to do it fast. This wasn't just about fighting the HOA anymore. It was about taking them down once and for all. But I needed the right ammunition. I needed to hit them where it hurt. I sat there for a moment thinking, and then it hit me. The one thing that Karen had always been so proud of. The thing she thought made her untouchable, the HOA's power. She loved it. She basked in it. She used it to control everyone around her. But what if I could take that power away from her? What if I could use the very rules she had forced onto everyone else to turn the tables? I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the HOA office. I wasn't sure if I was going to get anywhere, but I had to try. "Hello, this is the HOA office. How can I help you today?" The receptionist answered. "Yes, I'm calling about the recent fine I received," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'd like to request a formal hearing to contest this fine and any other claims the HOA may have against me." There was a pause on the other end. "You would like to request a hearing, sir? I will put in the request, but it will be up to the board to approve it." "I'm aware," I said, my voice steady. "I'm just making sure my request is on record." "Understood, Mr. Your name. I'll pass this along to the board. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" "No, thank you," I said, hanging up the phone. I had done it. I had set the wheels in motion. Now it was time to wait. I didn't expect an immediate response, but I knew it wouldn't take long for Karen to hear about it. And when she did, she'd be furious. I could already imagine the look on her face when she found out I had requested a hearing. She wasn't going to let this slide, not when she thought she was the one in control. As the days passed, I could feel the tension building. The neighbors were watching, and Karen was preparing for war. I had no idea what she was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. This fight was far from over. She was going to throw everything she had at me. And I was ready for it. Then, it happened. I was sitting at my kitchen table when I saw a car pull up to my house. It was a black SUV, and I recognized it immediately. It was one of the HOA board members, coming to deliver something. I opened the door, and the man handed me another envelope. His face was stern, his eyes avoiding mine. He didn't say anything, just turned and walked back to his car without a word. I closed the door behind me and tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter from the HOA, but this one was different. This wasn't just a fine. It was an official notice of legal action. They were threatening to take me to court over the ranch gate violation. They had escalated things to a whole new level. But this time, they had made a critical mistake. They had just given me the opening I needed. The moment I read the letter, a chill ran down my spine. Legal action. The HOA had crossed the line. I had known they would retaliate, but I never expected them to go this far. They had threatened to take me to court, to drag me through the legal system over a gate they had never cared about until I exposed Karen's hypocrisy. The audacity was mind-boggling. But instead of fear, something else stirred inside me. Determination. They had no idea what they were about to awaken. I wasn't just going to back down. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of making me cower in a corner. They wanted a battle? Fine. But they were about to get more than they bargained for. I sat there for a moment, staring at the letter, my mind racing. The HOA had finally made their move, but now it was my turn to strike back. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had been running things with an iron fist for so long, using their power to crush anyone who dared to stand up to them. And now, they were the ones in trouble. The tables had turned, and I had the perfect opportunity to expose everything. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone. The first call I made was to a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but someone who had a reputation for taking on big, corrupt organizations and winning. I needed someone who could handle the legal side of things, someone who knew how to make the HOA feel the weight of their own actions. The lawyer picked up on the second ring. Hello, Mr. Lawyer's name. This is your name. I need your help. The HOA is threatening to take me to court over a ranch gate violation, but I think it's time we turn the tables. The lawyer chuckled, and I could hear the amusement in his voice. Sounds like you've got yourself in quite the mess, but I'll help you out. Let's see what we can do. Do you have all the documents related to this? I glanced at the pile of papers on the table, the evidence I had been gathering for weeks. I've got everything. I'll send it over to you, but here's the thing. I don't just want to fight this in court. I want to make sure they never pull this kind of stunt again. The lawyer's voice grew more serious. Well, you've come to the right place. We'll make sure they know you're not backing down. But we're going to do this the smart way. It's not just about winning this case. It's about making sure they understand there are consequences for their actions. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had someone in my corner who could actually help me fight back. The HOA had thought they could intimidate me into submission, but they had underestimated me. This wasn't just about a fine or a ranch gate. This was about taking down an entire corrupt system that had been bullying the residents for years. I spent the rest of the day gathering my documents and preparing for the legal battle that was about to unfold. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the HOA's corruption went. This wasn't just about a president who thought she was above the rules. This was about an entire board that had been operating in the shadows, using their positions to impose ridiculous fines and control the lives of everyone in the neighborhood. Karen, in her arrogance, had thought she was untouchable. But she wasn't. And now, I was going to make sure the world knew exactly what kind of person she was. The next day, I sent all the documents to my lawyer, along with a detailed account of everything that had happened, the fines, the warnings, the letters. I made sure to include the details of Karen's violation, the one that had sparked this whole mess. She had broken the rules, and I had the proof. The lawyer called me later that afternoon. I've got the documents and we're ready to move forward. I've already contacted the HOA's legal team and I'm not going to sugarcoat it for them. This is going to be a real headache for them, especially since you've got all the evidence of their shady tactics. I couldn't help but smile. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. The HOA had wanted a fight, and now they were going to get one. I wasn't just going to let them bully me or anyone else ever again. It was time for justice, and I was going to make sure Karen and her cronies paid for their arrogance. Days passed, and the tension in the neighborhood kept building. I could feel the eyes on me as I walked through the streets. Some neighbors looked at me with a mix of curiosity and admiration. They knew what was happening. They knew this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about all of us. Everyone who had ever been fined or threatened by the HOA, everyone who had ever been silenced by Karen's power, was now watching.
The lawyer called me again, and this time his voice was filled with confidence. We're ready. The HOA has been served. It's only a matter of time before they realize they're not in control anymore.
I sat back in my chair, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. The pieces were falling into place, and soon Karen and the board would have to face the consequences of their actions. But I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The real battle was about to begin, and I had no intention of backing down. I could feel the tension thick in the air, like a storm was brewing just on the horizon. The HOA had already taken their shot at me, trying to bully me into submission with that legal threat. But now it was my turn. The wheels were in motion, and Karen and the board had no idea what was coming. I walked through the neighborhood, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. The atmosphere had shifted. People were starting to talk, whispers in every corner about the battle brewing between me and the HOA. Some of the neighbors had started to see things for what they were. They weren't just watching my fight, they were beginning to see the cracks in the HOA's perfect facade.
I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone who had been intimidated, threatened, or fined for no reason other than Karen's thirst for control. This was bigger than one man versus one woman. This was about taking down a system that had used fear and power for far too long. The court date was set, and the anticipation was unbearable. I spent hours with my lawyer, going over every detail, every piece of evidence. We were going to make sure the HOA knew they had messed with the wrong person. But it wasn't just about the case anymore. It was about sending a message to Karen and the board. A message that they couldn't get away with this. Not anymore. The M.O.
Morning of the court hearing, I woke up early, my mind racing. I could already feel the weight of the day ahead. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be a fight. But I was ready for it. I had prepared myself for this moment, and I wasn't about to back down. As I arrived at the courthouse, I couldn't help but notice the contrast between my calm demeanor and the anxiety in the air. The HOA's lawyers were already there, sitting at a table with their documents spread out before them. Karen was sitting nearby, her arms crossed, her face tight with anger. She didn't look like someone who had expected this to go this far. She probably thought I'd fold under pressure. She was wrong. I took a deep breath and walked into the courtroom. My lawyer was already there, talking to the judge and going over the details. The air was thick with anticipation. I could feel the eyes of the board members on me, and I couldn't help but smile. This was it. This was where everything changed. The judge called the room to order, and the case began. The HOA's lawyer got up first, presenting their side of the argument, claiming that I had broken the rules by activating the alarm on my property without permission. They even tried to paint me as a troublemaker, someone who didn't respect the HOA's authority. It was laughable, but I stayed calm. I wasn't going to let their words get to me. I knew I had the evidence. When it was my turn, I stood up and walked to the front. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me. Karen was sitting at the back, her face a mix of disbelief and fury. She didn't know what was coming. I wasn't just here to defend myself. I was here to expose the truth. I started by going over the events in detail. The ranch gate, the violation, the fines. But I didn't stop there. I laid out the bigger picture. The countless complaints I had received, the violations I had been charged with, all the rules that the HOA had enforced arbitrarily. I didn't just talk about my own case. I talked about the broader issue, the power the HOA had been wielding for years, the unfair treatment, the way they had used their position to control people's lives. As I spoke, I saw the board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They weren't used to being on the receiving end of a public shaming. They had always been the ones in control, the ones who held the power. But now, they were the ones being exposed. I saved the best for last. "Karen," I said, looking directly at her, "you and this HOA have been using your position to manipulate and intimidate people for years, and you've gotten away with it. But not anymore. I'm here to make sure the truth comes out, and you're held accountable for your actions." I could see Karen's face go pale. Her eyes darted around the room. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She hadn't expected this. She thought she could control everything, but she hadn't counted on me fighting back. The courtroom fell silent. For a moment, it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. The judge looked at both sides, his face unreadable. It was clear that the decision wasn't going to come easily. After a long pause, the judge spoke. "I've reviewed all the evidence, and it's clear that this case is not as simple as it appears. I will take this under advisement and issue my ruling in the coming days." The tension in the room was palpable. No one knew what was going to happen next, but I could feel the weight of the moment. I had done everything I could. Now, it was in the judge's hands. As we left the courtroom, I could hear Karen muttering under her breath. She was furious. But I wasn't worried. I had already won. The truth had been spoken, and the HOA had been exposed for what it truly was, a group of power-hungry individuals who thought they could get away with anything. But now, everyone knew the truth. I left the courthouse with a sense of satisfaction. I didn't care what the final ruling was. The battle was over. I had stood up for what was right, and that was all that mattered.